Let me turn off our phones. I got the mic. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everybody. Alrighty, roll call.
Okay. Director Radaman,
Here.
Director Davidson,
Here.
President Cicada,
Here.
Director Thomas is on his way, and Director Underhill is absent today.
Thank you. All right, now's the time for public comment. At this time, members of the public may address the board on any non-agendized item. The public is encouraged to work through staff to place items on the agenda for board consideration. No action can be taken on matters not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person.
3 minutes and everybody get fast.
Yeah.
I'm Jerry Brock. I live in Lake Tulloch, 415 Lakeview Road. The water company says that I had a leak and my meter, all my valves were turned off and my clocks were turned off for the January, February, and March. And I got a bill here for $1,600 for water. So I came in and I talked with Damon, and he showed me on a screen that they'd put a new meter in. And this meter showed that it spiked 5 or 6 days in a row, water usage. And so I called the office, and the lady says, "Well, Jerry, you got a leak yourself." I said, "No, I don't have a leak." She says, "Yes." She says, "You got a bill here for $1,600. I said, "I don't have a leak." She says, "Well, you better get somebody to check it for you." So I called the plumber in town that can find the leaks. Him and his partner came out. They checked the stools, the faucets, the watering system, everything. I got a bill here for $159. They didn't find nothing. They said there is no leaks. And the lady that bills says that this bill was for the 2 months that I had everything shut off. Now, Damon's men have been out there, I don't know how many times looking for a leak. But the way this all started was when I came back off of vacation the second week of March, water was running in my waterfall. And so I pumped it all out, filled it back up the next day. I pumped out again and filled it back up. So then I
You said the water was running in your what?
waterfall,
Waterfall, okay.
yeah. And lost my train of thought. Anyway, they can't find a leak, and that water is still running. Okay, in my waterfall. Now it's running into my yard below, and I just put astroturf in it last year, and it's got that flooded, big spot of it. And when Patrick came out last week, I showed him, now it's running over to the house foundation. Now it's up against my house. You know, I don't mind paying a bill if I owe it. This $1,600 is not my water bill. And they changed the meter, and the lady said that this was before the meter was changed. It can't be, it was shut off. I mean, $1,600 worth of water, you would see where it was, I would think. There's no indication of any water at all. There wasn't.
Waterfall, is that your own water feature on your property?
Yes.
Michael, have you been able to research any of this?
And we're off, it is a public comment, so we can't really provide a response here. But I can assure you staff are working with the
I was
customer.
going to say
negotiation.
maybe we can agendize it for the next meeting to fill us in with what you got going on. Is that okay?
They've already taken this $1,600 out of my credit card.
Well,
Michael, you can work with them outside.
There is I'm sure they've let you know that there is a leak adjustment policy. It's a district. They've not given you that information.
Somebody told me that. I forgot who it
Oh,
was.
okay, well, that's one way that you can take a look at, but again, it's not agendized. We can't have a long conversation about it. That'll violate the Brown Act. But there is a one-time remedy. And so I'm sure working with Michael, we'll get to that.
No, I had a leak here several years back, and they made an adjustment on that.
Yeah.
Might
I just had one
might be
too.
3 years.
I just had one too, that a tree fell on my fence and that fence post actually drove right down into one of my pasture pipes, which was far away from the house. I didn't realize it. So, I mean, it happens.
But you're doing the right thing. You brought it to us. You're working with staff. During public comment here, we really shouldn't be having this discussion. It's for you to comment. You got your 3 minutes, told us what's going on. You're working with Michael and Cindy is going to put this on our next meeting to get some details on. It'll be on our agenda, and you're working with staff. I think that's all we can do for today.
Right, we'll work with Michael outside of this meeting and we'll have it agendized so we could be updated with what the solution, what the remedy was.
How do I get a hold of Michael?
I can contact you because I know staff have been in contact with you and have actually visited the property multiple times. So
Yeah, I'd like for you to come out and look at it.
That'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any public comment online? Seeing none. All right, we'll move on to item number 3, consent agenda. The following items are expected to be routine, non-controversial. Items will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member may request that any item be removed for later discussion. We have a motion.
Move for acceptance of 3A, 3B, 3C, 3D.
Second.
And I can go ahead and do all those in favor.
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none? We have 4-1-0. All right, let's move on to item number 4. We're going to open the annual standby assessment fee public hearing. I'm looking for a first and a second to approve resolutions 2022-51 through 2022-56.
Move for acceptance of resolution 2022-51 through 2022-56.
Second.
Right, any public comment? Anything online? Seeing no public comment, I'll now close the public hearing and I'll take the vote. We have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that assessment fees have passed. All right, we're going to go to new business. Item 5A, discussion action regarding credit adjustment for 2 parcels, one on the Hoopa Circle and the other one Sierra Parkway, both of them in Camp Connell.
Good
Hi, Jess.
afternoon. Hi. So we have 2 customers who have applied for credit adjustments, and both of these exceed $1,000, which require board approval. Both of these accounts are located in Camp Connell. Both had leaks that have since been repaired. And one issue with these 2 is that the reason why these leaks adjustment amounts are so high is due to our AMI implementation and having to bill base rate consumption for 6 months up there. So once they got their first bill, they saw this amount.
All right, any
Are they near,
questions?
are they near each other? I mean, is there something that caused these leaks that?
There's nothing to suggest that they are related. They're just 2 separate leaks in Camp Connell area.
I move for acceptance of resolution 2257 and 2258.
Second. It's just amazing that the consumption from $18 to $2,000.
All right, board, any other questions for us?
Nope.
Any public comment? Seeing none, we have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, we go ahead and approve item 5A. 0. All right, moving on to item 5B. Action or discussion action regarding the slurry line water service customer template agreement. Hello, Brad.
Good afternoon, directors. Happy to report on the slurry line here and the progress Michael and I and other staff have been making.
Okay, Michael, was there supposed to be somebody here that we should wait for? Do you want me to hold on this and move on to something else?
This can be granted once.
We can go to the stage 2 item.
Okay,
Okay.
so Rebecca, we're going to move to 5C and hold 5B.
Okay.
And discussion action regarding stage 2 water supply conditions per CCWD water shortage contingency plan. And hello again, Mr. Arnold.
Hello again, and switching gears now to stage 2 of our water shortage contingency plan. Recall that we adopted a water shortage contingency plan, the 2020 update compliant with the California Water Code that defined 6 stages of shortage depending on our water supply conditions, what the service areas look like in terms of projected demands, and analysis that we performed to understand what dry conditions are, what tolls they're taking on our reservoir systems as well as our operational systems. The board in July of 2021 adopted stage 1, the advisory condition of that plan as we were continuing with the drought, essentially acknowledging voluntary actions, attempting to try and push the service areas towards a 10% demand reduction, again, mostly voluntary at the time. However, with the late March governor's executive order, it required that water suppliers at a to be determined date needed to move into stage 2 of their water shortage plans. Our water shortage plan becomes less voluntary at that point and has several actions outlined in terms of mandatory leak repair, as well as certain landscape irrigation requirements, and then other minor requirements for hotels and restaurants, for instance, to not offer water service for some of their laundry or dinner services, for example. At this point, we do need to adopt the stage 2 actions by June 10th, a couple days from now, per the executive order, and then subsequent state water board emergency regulations. So unfortunately, we don't have much of a choice per se in moving to stage 2. That's part of the governor's executive order. And so what we're proposing here today is a resolution to acknowledge and move into stage 2 per that requirement. This would put us again into what are called alert conditions. And we would start to move into some water response actions that we can detail here. At this point, since we are the only urban water supplier in Calaveras County who has a water shortage contingency plan, we are in some senses going to be leading the way for others as well, who might have to follow with other requirements of their own or to be determined state board actions. So with that, I can answer any questions on what stage 2 might look like, some of the provide an overview of some of the actions, but again, this is required by the state board and executive order.
Move for acceptance.
Second.
I just have a question. If somebody doesn't abide by this stage 2, is there some kind of trouble they get into or whatever?
Yeah, great question. So in the water shortage plan that was adopted, we do lay out what are called enforcement actions, and admittedly, we're going into a bit of new territory at this point. I've been working with Damon, Jessica, and others to not only push outreach, but to also look at what operations staff can do to support some of the enforcement. I don't want to speak for Damon, I'll look through him, but I don't think we're going to be water cops anytime soon in Calaveras County. And so we'll rely on Jessica with outreach, and then hopefully we get folks in the county to report leaks and other issues they're seeing. And then we'll have to fit that into our regular work as to how we respond to those particular actions. In other words, we'll do the best we can and hope that we're able to move in a direction that's consistent with the EO. Speaking of outreach, and before I forget, I'm happy to answer any other questions, but I do want to give Jessica a chance to mention some of the great work Calaveras conserves and that she's been doing to acknowledge the drought as well. So
Put her on the spot.
just to throw you up here, but
It's okay, Jess. You don't have to if you don't want to.
Well, no, did she gonna get a badge and a gun or?
Oh, that will be great. It's non-potable water.
Might be considered a waste. Wasteful
make it-
activity.
Make it treated water.
So here's just a copy of each stage that we have. So just as a reminder of what stage 2 looks like. So irrigation is prohibited between the hours of 10 to 6. All leaks, breaks, other malfunctions shall be repaired within 72 hours of being notified by the district. Use of water on clean driveways, walkways, parking lots are prohibited. Restaurants may only serve water upon request. Lodging establishments must offer opt-out linen service, and customers must take actions to establish appropriate run times for landscape irrigation. So these are pretty basic measures, but it will provide an uptick in phone calls from customers with regards to, especially to the leaks and things like that. So internally, we have been working closely with customer service staff and operations staff to just plan for this and prepare for this. So starting tomorrow, we will have a new extension on our main line so that anyone can report an anonymous leak or excess water usage. And that will hopefully help with customer service staff to not get bogged down with phone calls.
Jessica, how is that 72 hours? Does it apply to us as well? It seems like we have leaks that sometimes don't get addressed within 72 hours.
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's a difficult one there. That's one that's really tough. Right now, when we get calls from customers with regards to leaks, that they're usually complaining about us.
Right.
So, one thing is we do have the new utility crew working hard to replace service laterals, and we are prioritizing leaks, and we are going to do our best to fix leaks, but obviously that 72-hour mark is impossible for us to do district-wide. So that's a tough one.
Number one, the 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., I doubt that we have many customers that are going to go out and change their timers as a result of our motion. And if we vote to accept these stage 2, which I know we will, it is a mandate. But how do we address that? What does it look like when you get a call? Hey, someone's watering their yard or their drip system is on. It's at noon.
But before you answer that, how are these folks going to know? Did we send out something to, like even the commercial, the restaurants, you can't serve water unless they ask, that kind of thing?
So great question. So step 1 is we get through this board meeting, and then after that, I'll be pushing out a press release that's already ready to go. And then I'll be pushing it out on social media and on our website. As far as restaurants and hotels, I'll be working and doing outreach with them so they are aware of that change. Exactly. Or in person. So I'll be making sure that we touch base with all of them. So getting that message out as much as possible and as soon as possible is the first step with that.
Is there a county agency that can help with the restaurant?
That's a great question. So I'm actually thinking of reaching out to the county to see if we can push a message out that way a little bit easier, so that we aren't having
Because
to.
who usually does that? Is it environmental health?
Environmental health.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe
So
talk to
that's
the
one
city
thing.
In their everyday duties, if they're inspecting, maybe they can
Right.
help.
And then what's also difficult is it's only CCWD. I do know other agencies in the county are not yet moving into stage 2 like we are. So that is
Why
one
not?
challenge.
I wonder. It's a mandate?
Size.
Yeah, to clarify, they don't have water
They don't.
storage contingency plans.
They don't have to.
Oh,
So that's going to be a challenge. So that goes into Calaveras Conserve. So we'll be meeting here in the next week or two to discuss where we all are after getting through this process and then pushing out a consistent and cohesive message so that we can try to provide clarity to everyone in the county.
with our plan, could we invite and somehow include all the other agencies in the county to be part of our plan? So that way we all act as one?
Yeah, so that's kind of where Calaveras Conserves comes in. So that's what we work on. We work on having that consistent, cohesive message for all of Calaveras County. So we are kind of leading the way with that one. So that's the outreach push. But then as Director Ratterman asked, what happens when we get phone calls? So what the plan is that if someone calls, they can leave a message on that line. We will document it and put it in a spreadsheet. Once we have a repeated repeated calls, we will send out an email or letter notifying the customer that we've received information that this is happening. Here's some education. We're in stage 2. These are the criteria. And then move on from there. The big thing is we want to try to limit our ops staff from having to be the water police, not only for time, but also safety reasons as well.
Geez, hopefully we want to avoid our field crew from doing the same thing as well.
Right.
Just one question on the stage 3. Down at the bottom, it says golf course irrigation will be restricted to greens and trees, which is interesting, if raw water was the sole source. So if they're using the mixture, it doesn't matter what the percentage is, or?
Yeah, correct. Since both of our golf courses are using at least a portion of reclaimed water in the county, as we understand from the requirements, they would be able to continue. We would, of course, try to encourage them not to use raw water and to make sure they drop that portion of their intake as low as possible. But I look to Michael and Matt, correct? My understanding is they still would be able to.
Yeah, my correction is it's 3 golf courses, it's not 2.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Don't forget about Forest Meadow. They're open again.
I had one other question. In the staff report, I came across something that I'm not familiar with what is meant by a single pass cooling system. Can you clarify that?
Good question, and I actually don't mean to deflect that, but I'm looking to Dean and others. I don't know, we don't have single pass cooling systems in CCWD service areas that I'm aware of, correct?
Third page.
What is it?
It's, yeah, I'm thinking it's some,
Probably more for industrial facilities that you divert cooling water for a one-time use.
Yeah.
And then some of it would be consumed, some of it presumably discharged again.
As opposed to like a swamp cooler, which recirculates
Or
it?
recirculating water with a cooler. Right.
Okay.
If it had piqued my curiosity, I would have tried this thing called Google.
Go ahead, Rush. You can respond to that. Kick him under the
Google.
table or something.
Do you have your Encyclopedia Britannica collection out?
You are not immune from the charge of elder abuse, you know that?
We don't
Once you look it
discriminate
up,
based on
Lord.
tech adoption.
yeah,
All
so,
right.
so just to finish off on
I'm
sort
not
of,
going to vote for this.
And they're off.
to finish up on sort of 2 thoughts here, is it's one unique compared to the last drought of 2015 that Sacramento is looking to the local agencies and saying, you guys have your own plans that we forced you to develop with these water shortage contingency plans. You implement your stages. Now, granted, we all know that CCWD supply options this year does not warrant stage 2 necessarily, but instead we can look at this in the sense that we still get to dictate, amend our water shortage plans. There are things we can do to work within the requirements while having a plan that we ultimately control within, certain California water code regulations. The other part is just to echo what Jessica was talking about with regards to, we are the only legal urban water supplier in Calaveras County because we meet the 3,000 acre foot delivered, 3,000 connection limitation. And so because of that, we are in the unique position of being the only ones who has this plan and has the 6 stages defined. There's things we can do to influence and help others, CPUD, Uticas, others in the county to try and curb some of their usage and conservation actions through Calaveras Conserves. But also, we are leading the way in some sense, and it's good to put our plan to the test here and see that we probably didn't need to be in stage 2, but we'll acknowledge the EO and move forward with the plan that we've developed in-house.
There's nothing that will prevent any of these other agencies from adopting the same restrictions if they want to, right?
And exactly, and they might actually want to, consider that, given that for those who don't have a water shortage plan, the state board has made it known that they're also considering what to do with those agencies and the type of restrictions they're going to put together for their response action. So they may want to get a jump on the ball and adopt what we've put together for Calaveras County before they let Sacramento dictate
Tell
what they
them
have
what
to.
to do.
Exactly, yeah.
Interesting. All right, any more discussion, board? Do we have any public comment? No public comment. Can I get a motion in a second? Did we?
You did.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Here we go then. All those in favor
Aye.
and those opposed? How did I not hear? Who did the first and the second? That was early on, huh?
It was an hour ago.
I did the.
Hey, just like it was a single pass water thing. All right, so do we want to move on and wait again? We can go to the,
It's online,
oh, okay, very good.
5B.
All right, so Rebecca, we're going to go back to item 5B, discussion action regarding the slurry line water service customer template agreement. And we have Brad again.
Sorry, I was looking at some of my papers from Jessica. We're returning to slurry line item, correct?
Yes.
Correct, okay. Well, hello again on this item. Happy to provide an update on the slurry line services that we've been looking at using the existing slurry line facilities. Again, just to recall this, there's aluminum portion pipeline that runs from Utica Ditch down to a vault that CCWD owns, and then continues towards San Andreas. It's the old, I believe, Lehigh Southwest slurry line, it used to be called. At this point, the board did approve the wheeling agreement with Utica that was executed on June 1st. We have been making progress with NCPA to acknowledge the up to 1,000 acre feet a year we can deliver within the slurry line service area place of use. We are making good progress on that requirement of the agreement. And so what we're presenting here today is not the sort of institutional side of how we wheel water, but more of getting some feedback on there.
Donnie, mind in your microphone? There you go.
Perfect. But this is more of the customer base side now. What you see attached to the agenda item here is what we're calling a template agreement. So similar to what we've done in the past with the new, the Calaveras River agriculture users, for instance, where we had a sort of formulaic boilerplate language agreement that we put together to make use of our new Hogan supplies for them, is what we're presenting here now for a boilerplate language that not only protects our water rights and supplies, protects our infrastructure on the slurry line, but ultimately puts together the considerations of how we get water to the potential customers, a number that we've identified along the slurry line. So if approved here by the board, what staff's recommending is that the board grant the GM authority to fill in the blanks on this agreement with what we're calling the subject lands, those areas within the slurry line service area that can be serviced from the slurry line. That would, following engineer and operations staff review, contain things like turnout information that this customer would have to build, and then ultimately would lay out the service costs and fees they would need to pay us each year for water they receive on the slurry line. Important to point out there is the Exhibit C of the template agreement, which is the costs and fees. This would be fairly expensive water for them, but certainly given, the existing infrastructure, our very strong position in the North Fork Stanislaus River watershed, being able to use those rights to provide water here. It's very reliable water that would cost around $78 an acre foot, and then have a potential $2,600 a year fee to take care of things like cannabis reporting, infrastructure cost recovery, and sort of those firm costs that we've already absorbed as a district, trying to recover some of those. So assuming the customers are okay with those costs, are okay with engineer staff review of what a turnout would look like and require them to build connected to the slurry line, then the rest of this would set up a certain amount of scheduled water service for them.
On Exhibit C, I just noticed that NCPA isn't on here, and I don't know if we got a wheeling agreement with them yet. Anyway, what's going on with that portion of this project?
Yeah, great question. And Michael, feel free to fill in if I miss anything here. But essentially, we have the wheeling agreement that was approved by the board last time. We've executed with Utica. There's a condition in there that acknowledges we need to get NCPA's approval essentially to begin wheeling our North Fork Stanislaus River water through the tunnel tap and Utica system. That's consistent with the amended and restated PPA, the master agreement, if you will, that we've had with NCPA for the North Fork project. We are working on that currently. All we need is some sort of letter acknowledgement and approval from NCPA that says, okay, we acknowledge you have the rights to do this. The 1997 state board order allows it. Go ahead and start moving water. We are well within that process of basically sending them the info they needed so that they return that letter acknowledgement to us. They're not really included in the customer.
We don't anticipate them having, or saying that they have any costs associated with doing this?
No, so well, actually, and everything Brad said is correct. I'll add a little bit more detail, and that is just that, there've been multiple attempts, as some of you been a part of in the past, multiple requests to CPA, either from CCWD or Utica, to move CCWD water through the Utica system. It's always kind of hit a dead end for various reasons. And this time around, we've made it a whole lot farther than I think those previous attempts, which is really exciting. I think we're essentially in agreement with NCPA. We're kind of finalizing the actual write-up is where we're at on that. They are not, and they didn't want to be and don't need to be a party to the wheeling agreement with Utica or a party to these CCWD agreements with our customers. Essentially, what the 95 amended and restated agreement requires is simply written consent from NCPA to move CCWD water through the Utica system. So the form that that's going to take is a letter agreement that addresses some of the concerns that NCPA has raised, in particular, a very detailed accounting of our water rights and which water rights will be used to meet this demand and under a timing that is consistent with the state water board's rulings on those water rights, which Brad has done a fantastic job of outlining in very great detail. And that really has been one of the biggest hurdles in the past, is just meeting the data requests from NCPA, which aren't unreasonable. It just takes work and a level of detail that hasn't been met in the past. So Brad's done a great job of laying that out for them, that here's the water rights that we will use, that we have a very sound basis in, and the timing and, you know, all of that. They also just had some questions about metering and reporting and monitoring and how that's going to work. And really, it's Utica's meter for the most part. So initially, we were thinking of using one of our new Mueller meters and incorporating it into our AMI network, which would have required some additional infrastructure on our end. And it's not a setup that Utica or NCPA are familiar with. So in the end, what we've agreed to do is use a configuration that those two agencies are very comfortable with, a different type of meter, but one that they use in multiple locations, because they do a reporting and agreement process every month on truing up how much water moves through the Utica system, and making sure that it's consistent with how much they were supposed to take. So Utica has already ordered the meter and the equipment that will be installed there. It includes a solar installation, as we need power there. It'll be integrated into their SCADA system, automatically generate reports every month that will be reconciled between Utica and NCPA, showing exactly how much water went through the slurry line. So all those details had to be addressed to NCPA's satisfaction. Like I said, I think we're there on all of them. There's a few other minor points, but I think we're there on everything. It's just a matter of making sure we agree on, you know, where the I's are and where the T's are, and that they're all dotted and crossed.
Are you planning on having these agreements signed before you have something signed with NCPA?
It's unlikely, but possible. It's not necessarily we wouldn't move any water through the slurry line until we have that agreement with NCPA. And I don't think we might sign these agreements first if necessary. I don't think anybody would want to spend money on construction until we make sure that that's signed and done.
One of my questions is going to be, it says there's no refunds, and if at the last minute it fell through and they paid, I would assume they would get a refund.
I don't think anybody would want to spend money on it until we're sure we have that signed agreement from NCPA. So.
The other question I have is the cannabis reporting charge. That's something that the water provider has to.
So that's an additional cost to the water, to CCWD, that is solely passed, you know, because of additional reporting requirements that we have to comply with for the water board. And there's a lot of additional reporting.
Do we have several that we're reporting on already?
No.
This would be the first one.
And so that's an optional, it depends on the customer. So that would be in there if it's a cannabis customer, and it wouldn't be in there if it's not. And that's just, like I said, that's just a pass-through cost because we have additional costs in order to.
And as far as we know, we don't have any other cannabis growers that we provide water to. in the district?
Yeah, none that we would report on our water rights as use that we've approved by the district. Yeah, I've actually learned quite a bit diving into that because we have a prospective customer who wants to use this water towards cannabis cultivation. There's a lot of restrictions and extra reporting. As soon as you check the box on the annual reports for water rights that says, yes, this is going towards cannabis, the dang thing nearly doubles in terms of what I have to fill out. So a lot of that is my time going into this. There's other water quality requirements to ensure that there's no, source pollution runoff or anything that way. So there's a lot we're gonna have to fill in.
Is there any information you need from the cannabis grower that you need for that report?
There will be, yeah. Ultimately, when they sign on, approve this template agreement, then we're gonna have a pretty open relationship back and forth on some of the info I need to fill out those reports each year.
Okay. Anybody else?
Well, in regards to that, I'm pretty familiar with what these growers have to produce as far as their premise plan and that sort of thing. Once again, maybe we should coordinate with Calaveras County because I mean I'm trying to get 3 permits right now that we actually applied for last June. So it's been a year and they haven't quite been able to crack it. So they're still unorganized and the growers are not, even though they're spending tens of millions of dollars in some cases, they're not all that sophisticated when it comes to getting these pot plans together and stuff. So maybe we can work with the cannabis agency and the building department to make sure that we do have all our ducks in a row, that we're not holding anybody up.
I was already making a note of that when you made that comment. So yes, I think we should make sure that if there are permits that are being served by CCWD Water, that they're notifying us.
Yeah. Russ?
Yes, on the CCWD O&M rate at 1547, I think I'm right that our raw water charge down in the Burson area is about $17 per acre foot. Why are we charging less for this?
It's a different configuration because we also don't have the same type of fee structure there where we have the higher annual fee here and cost of infrastructure that's incorporated into that. So I think the water's more expensive once that all gets factored in. Yeah, so that's just kind of a different set of circumstances. We don't actually have infrastructure down there to serve those ag customers.
Okay.
That's all private pumps.
It's more of a water rights agreement than it is.
And if this is a draft, then I'm thinking that we probably have the legitimate right to comment on the content.
Oh, absolutely. That's the point of this item. And just to clarify, I think Brad touched on this already. The way we presented this is if the board approves this, essentially, the terms that we've laid out here and authorizes staff to fill in the blanks. That's one way to go about it. That's not the only way to go about it. If we're more comfortable of filling in the blanks and bringing each agreement back to the board for approval, we can also do it that way.
Well, it's just it makes my head spin trying to read this legalese, and I'm questioning item 20 or paragraph 22 says time of the essence. Time is and shall be the essence of this agreement, and that's almost the last paragraph. Why, if time is of the essence, why don't you put it in the first paragraph or the second, third? Just an observation. And paragraph 13 is a word salad. It's just gobbledygook.
Was that put in there because perhaps two neighbors are going to be under one agreement or something?
You ever read a lease, Russ?
Those are pretty standard provisions just in terms of implementation. But at the risk of saying something snarky about my previous profession, I'll let Matt answer those questions.
I mean, on the time is of the essence is if you ever get in a dispute about whether somebody timely performed, if that's not in there, then the court can extend the time periods. So it's a general boilerplate provision. And the counter in paragraph 13 essentially says somebody can sign it and we can just take their signature page and attach it. And we don't all have to sign the same document. That's basically what it says. So you can sign it in counterparts.
Wouldn't it be just as simple to say that?
Well, you would think, but you know.
Yeah, I would say just for reference, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it appears that everything pretty much starting after paragraph 10 is fairly boilerplate language, just the real meat of this, if you will, is before that.
Those are your standard provisions that you would have on any agreement like this, and everything else. And before that is your language specific to this agreement. If that
Okay.
helps.
I have a question on for the email administration at CCWD. Who gets that email? Customer service? Brad, do you? Michael, who reads it? Administration. Oh, good. You will forward them appropriately.
The
Okay.
answer to that question.
I just want to make sure somebody's reading it. We'll forward it to the right person. Sometimes they get lost, but
Yeah, no,
Rebecca's
but I
on.
think the purpose of having it, a generic email address like that is so that if there's staff turnover over
Right,
time, this
right.
agreement could last for 20
No,
years.
and I agree with that. I just wanted to make sure, I was curious as to who was reading it to make sure.
Right.
Is this water supply going to be guaranteed?
Yes, so I'll point out paragraph 1 on here, the quantity and place of use. That's going to set the annual volume that we're essentially guaranteeing to these customers. But then it acknowledges under the timing of delivery, paragraph 2, that each year we're going to work with them by April 1st to lay out a monthly schedule as to when we'll get that water to them. So really our only firm commitment here is the total amount of acre feet per year that we're going to give them. Within there, we give ourselves enough wiggle room to figure out and work with them to develop a schedule, just
Well,
in case we
I
run
can
out of
remember the Utica, when it was UPA and they were selling water, there was no guarantee that they were going to have it the next year.
Right.
And it really makes it, it's hard to make any kind of an investment, when you don't know if you're going to have, at least a period of time.
Right. And that's why we couldn't provide a monthly schedule as an exhibit, for instance, as we know there are outages. We know there are dry years where the growers may actually want water starting March before, May or something like that.
And there is, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say to that point that at least we've guaranteed them an amount of water per year for investment purposes so that they can.
What about a clause? I mean, if we're in a severe drought, we're covered in all that.
Yeah, so I was going to point
DWR
out,
says you
there
can't
are,
serve them water anymore, we're covered.
so this is all subject to the availability of the water rights that we've
Gotcha.
identified to serve these properties. And so if there's a drought that takes our storage and Spicer down to a level where the water is just not available, or state regulatory mandate that makes the water unavailable, we would be covered here. We can't deliver under those circumstances. There's also, and this was one of the items that NCPA wanted to make sure of, that there's nothing in here that would prevent them from, if they needed to do extended maintenance on the tunnel at the caves, for example, this agreement won't stop that from happening. And same with Utica in the off season in particular, when their outages are typically scheduled, there may be years where the ditch is not available to deliver water for the entire month of November. That would be covered in here because it is subject to that wheeling agreement with Utica and subject to the ability to move water through those pieces of infrastructure.
Do you have an estimate, target date of when you're going to start delivering water to anybody who has an agreement this year?
Yeah, so the two moving pieces really at this point are this agreement. Once we have approval to move forward with this framework, staff will meet with the customers that are serious about moving forward to establish, basically to fill in the blanks and establish the cost of installing the turnout and the meter, and then scheduling the time to do that work, making the upgrades at the turnout on the ditch, and Utica staff are going to do most of the work there with some assistance from CCWD. All that should be doable within the next month, and as long as we have that written agreement from NCPA in that time frame, we're hoping to potentially be able to make the water delivery through the slurry line in July.
Yay, July.
That's the goal.
That's what we're working on.
Yeah, lastly, I'll just point out in here, I think.
Yeah, does that time of essence clause work for the customer too?
Well, time, I'm sure we'll hear in a minute here, time is of the essence for the customers.
Yeah.
And I think those are based on, the process that we have here. I think those are reasonable expectations at this point. There's obviously, we'll report back on that and hopefully we're able to meet that timeline.
Very good. Any other questions?
Just lastly point out in here that just to tee off the time of the essence, because it's kind of comical that I've come across documents where the district has been investigating this since the early 90s for water supply delivery. That ultimately led to the 1997 board order that allowed us to use our water rights there. And then ultimately when the district purchased this in, I believe, 2017, 2018, this has been a long time. So it's exciting to think that, as Michael said, we're, you know, this close to July potentially providing water. That's really kind of remarkable at this point, and could be a neat way to finally get across the finish line.
And another excuse to get out our new big scissors.
Yes.
Is there any estimate of the economic value to that area? Have we made any? I mean, I think when we talk about this and when we cut the ribbon, it'd be nice to know, like, what's gonna get cultivated there, whether it's grapes or trees or cannabis, what's its annual value gonna be, just so we can, you know, show that, you know, that this is a significant improvement for that corridor.
I think that's a fantastic suggestion, and I think we have the information that we can pull that together for sure. Speaking of costs, there was a question at some point somebody raised, and I want to make sure I just touch on this. As I think it was Director Ratterman had asked about whether there's a cost to NCPA here. And there is, and it is something they point out every time we have this discussion. And it's not a wheeling charge, it's not a cost of moving the water necessarily, and it's our infrastructure, so there's no cost that will be passed through to us or to the customer, but it's water that's not going through Collierville. And so the point that they always make, and I think that we should make sure the board is aware of too, is, you know, any water that we divert out of the tunnel that otherwise would go through the powerhouse has an impact on the value of the project, of the North Fork project. So in this case, you know, we're not talking about a huge impact. It's a relatively small amount of water compared to the amount that moves through the powerhouse, but it is an impact to the value of the North Fork.
But the economic impact to the county is significant.
And the direction that staff has always received from this board is the prioritization of local use and beneficial use of that water to support our local irrigators and local communities. So that's the marching orders that staff has, and that's what we've been pursuing here. But it is just something that NCPA always likes to bring up as, hey, CCWD, this is your project, and by doing this, it does impact the value of the project.
Would we potentially have to pass this charge on if we know what that is to the customer, or is it already kind of built in?
I think, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I believe the answer is no, because in the amended and restated agreement, it already acknowledges that Ebbets Pass gets up to 8,000 acre feet a year for water supply purposes.
Okay.
And so within there, that's essentially our allotment. Now that does still require a letter acknowledgement to increase the amount we use within that 8,000 each time. So this 1,000 acre feet a year is still needing that NCPA approval, but we're still well below the 8,000 up there. And so, yeah, there's no need to.
It is an interesting question though, because, and who knows, that may change over time, because right now the agreement that we have for the North Fork project our revenue from the project doesn't fluctuate based on generation. But if in the future that were to change, that might be a cost the district considers passing on to customers, because by foregoing generation, we're reducing our revenue from the project. And that's what Utica essentially bases its irrigation rates on, is by delivering irrigation water, that water is not passing through the Murphy's powerhouse or the Angels powerhouse. And that's part of the calculation of their ag rate.
And we could cross that bridge.
I mean, NCPA might make the argument if they were here that maybe we should add that cost on and pass it through, even if it gets passed through to them, it's essentially, you know, passing it through to the North Fork project and making sure that any impact on the revenue to the North Fork project is offset. That's not something we have factored into this agreement, but that would be one way to potentially mitigate that impact.
Well, go ahead.
I'm talking about the size of the impact. I mean, if 645 acre feet annually divided by 365 days a year, that's 1.76 acre feet per day. What do they run through Collierville?
Right.
100,000?
Right.
It depends on the water year and the day that we're talking about, but yeah, it's not a huge percentage of their water.
It's more of just, I think their general point is every acre foot you take away from us is an acre foot that didn't go through quota mills.
Right, but the same is true of UTA. I mean, if they made a decision to use that water on agriculture, and the economic impact would be far larger for our county than what they get to subsidize their water systems with power generation.
But and they have done that. They filled their waiting list requests. They don't have any ag customers that they're waiting for water. And I know UPD is working towards that as well. But that's the impact, and that's how they offset that impact though, since they're an agency that is primarily dependent on that hydropower revenue. If they weren't offsetting that impact, it would be a huge economic hit to UPD, the City of Angels. In our case,
Not if they sold the water for the price of the power.
well, that's what I mean. They recover that cost
Yeah.
through the water sale, but if they didn't do that, it would then fall on the
Well, yeah.
member agencies. So that's how they factor that into their rate. We're not doing that here, in part because it doesn't impact our bottom line. It is an impact to the Norfolk project, which is ours. But the revenue taker for on the per kilowatt hour basis right now is NCPA.
All right, before we go to public comment, any other questions here for us? Can I get a first? A motion?
Make a motion to provide the authority for Calaveras County Water District General Manager to execute an agreement for water supply from the Cataract Cement Slurry Line provided by the Calaveras County Water District with prospective customers.
I'll second that.
All right, let's open up for public comment, and I think we have Donnie up there. You ready?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just first wanted to say thank you guys for all your work on this project, and I really wanted to be there today, but we had a problem with our well pump that I was addressing today, so it was kind of fitting that we're passing this today when my wells are giving me problems. So yes, time is of the essence for us. The quicker we can get onto this line, the better. We had our contractor come out last week and give us an estimate on what it's going to cost to get our infrastructure put on place on our side of the meter. We understand the fees. We understand that administrative fee. And I really want to just say thanks to Mike for taking his time to come up, and I wasn't able to meet with him because we're really busy this time of year here at the farm, and he took his time to come up and explain this whole agreement with me, and I just wanted to thank him for that and thank the board for all the work you guys have done for a long time working on this project. And as far as economic impact goes, it's going to make a difference on our bottom line, I'll tell you that. Even with the administration fees being what they are, you guys are still saving us a lot of money, a lot of heartache, and giving us a sense of security to expand. We're hoping to, grow somewhere around 1.5 million in sales this year if, weather goes good and everything goes good. But we have the ability to double that now because of all your guys' hard work. And we have the ability to add other crops to our farm, to diversify this farm, to not be solely dependent on cannabis, to give it longevity for my children. And I just want to say that none of that could be possible without you guys.
Well, we're glad to be here, and we want to sell water, right? Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? And we're passed. There you go. We're
Great.
moving forward.
Thank you, directors.
Thank you, Brad.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you,
Donnie,
everybody.
for joining us.
Thank you, Donnie. All right, looks like we are moving on to item number 6, the budget workshop discussion regarding the fiscal year 2022-23 preliminary operating and capital improvement budgets. And this is Michael and perhaps Jeff.
All right, well, it's going to be a team effort.
Cindy, can we take a short break before this?
Oh, sorry.
Derek, can we do a short break, please? 5 minutes?
Great idea.
I guess I better go too.
Yeah, no, this is.
I'll be watching you,
All right, we're moving along. Are you proud, Jeff?
Great.
Okay, let's come back from recess. And we're gonna go item number 6, the budget workshop. And I think Michael and Jeff are probably ready.
3 minutes per person.
Okay, next, on the page that you had us change out, on this page was there, can you tell me what was changed, or was there an error, what the change was?
There was an error in the center column for the sewer revenue.
Okay, it's okay, you can share, I just didn't want to
It didn't change.
compare.
Okay, did not change the final numbers.
Okay,
There's nothing, all the same in terms of numbers. It's just the error on the sewer fund 500 for revenues.
okay, we'll go over that.
Okay.
Hi, Jeff.
Yeah, I'll kick it off, but Jeff's going to be a big part of this as well. We have the budget folks that they can speak to specific department items as well available. So we have a lot of staff resources available to address questions as they come up. This is I think kind of exciting for me. I'm really, it's been a challenging process with a lot of moving pieces and a lot of things changing. But I'm pleased with how it has come out at this point, at least. So I think what I'll do, we do have some slides where we can just talk about the overviews. In the board packet, you have a more detailed version of the budget that includes notes underneath each GL that explain what the purpose of each GL and how we arrived at the total is. Staff report touches on some of the highlights, the big swings one direction or another. Unfortunately, mostly in the upward direction, but it covers a lot of that. So I think the staff presentation at least will start with just overview, but at any point in time, please feel free to raise questions, because I want to make sure we're focusing on the items that the board members want to talk about. So don't hesitate to comment at any point. Starting with the budget summary and terminologies. So when we brought this to the Finance Committee a couple of weeks ago, we presented it as a draft budget. The terminology we're using in the presentation is a preliminary budget, although I made the mistake of using the term draft budget in the staff report a lot, but we did present this to the Finance Committee a couple weeks ago. It hasn't changed a lot. There's been some minor changes between then and now, but it's still pretty much the same as
When
what the
you
Finance Committee
get to
saw.
that particular spot, will you tell me that this is a particular change from the finance? When you get to that one, say we change this one and then tell me why.
Yeah.
Yes.
So starting with the sources of the budget, just on this high level first slide, we're looking at revenue in the range of 26.1 million. One of the big highlights you're going to hear throughout this budget discussion is the reallocation of R&R revenue from the CIP to the operating budget, which explains a significant portion of the increase in the overall budget. it looks like a significant, expansion of our operating budget, when really a large part of that is accounted for by shifting our revenue that otherwise would have been spent in the CIP and including it in the operating budget to cover a couple of things. The biggest one is the debt service on the loans. So the board approved, and we've already closed water, but not yet wastewater. It should be closing any day. Next Thursday. So the debt service on those two loans would be about $2 million a year. That's $2 million a year of R&R revenue that we otherwise would have spent in the CIP that wouldn't have shown up here in the operating budget.
It hasn't been approved, but it is in the budget. We're anticipating.
It is in a preliminary budget, so that's why you see what looks like an expansion of the budget. It's really a reallocation of those R&R funds from CIP to operating budget. The other thing that drives that expansion, again, is still a transfer of R&R funds, but when we established the underground utility crew, we created 3 new staff positions. And the justification behind that was this is work that we were otherwise going to contract out, and that would have been paid through the CIP budget, similar to the way we did the Kirby Garner Gabor project, when we replaced 100 service lines prior to adding the utility crew. So that is large. Sorry,
Wasn't that a $450,000 contract?
I believe it was the total project cost came to about 600,000.
Okay.
So those positions are largely funded by R&R revenue as well, that otherwise would have been directed towards CIP, contracting out that work, but now shows up in the operating budget. So there's some major drivers like that explain why it looks like a significant expansion of the budget, but it's all utilizing the same revenue that we've been receiving previously. You'll also at the same time see an increase in the CIP expenditures. So while we've shifted the R&R revenue largely to cover debt service, the increase in the CIP expenditures is a result of the loans and utilizing the reserves, the remainder of the CIP, the R&R revenue that we have, the reserves that we have, and the loans that we're able to secure, in addition to a lot of grant funding that staff has done a fantastic job to pull in and is still doing a lot of work to pursue additional grant funds to fund those projects. So by shifting that R&R revenue into the operating budget, we're not decreasing the rate of delivery of infrastructure projects. We're actually planning a significant increase in CIP implementation. Yes, Director.
I'm glad we're starting here. That's where I was open to in my book on the agenda, not as much as the staff report. But I think if we understand this page, if we start, and I'm so glad that we're starting here, because that's where I was going to ask that we start. It looks like a simple page, last year's budget compared to this year's budget and the variance column. Awesome. So I just want to understand, starting with last year's budget, that there's $8 million. Is that $8 million left over from last year's budget that was approved and didn't get spent and transferred into this year's budget? Is that what that starting fund balance, or where does that?
I wish that were the case.
Yeah.
There probably will be, and I'm glad you raised that point. So I'll touch on starting fund balance really quick and then answer your question. But finance staff are still working to resolve where we ended up at the end of last fiscal year to determine if there's any potential starting fund balance that we can rely on in this upcoming year's budget. And we should have that information by the 22nd, I think. The $8 million in last year's budget was part of the effort to undo Fund 101. This gets into the weeds pretty deep pretty quickly here, but based on auditor recommendations, we have to do away with Fund 101, which was essentially kind of a catch-all general fund for lack of a better term.
I remember talking about that during the.
Yeah, and didn't Rebecca do all kinds of
And feel
stuff
free to throw your
trying
shoe
to-
at me or anything at any point if I'm getting this wrong. But that was part of that effort, was to reallocate funds that had been spent through 101. There's a significant effort underway right now to change how that was done. And so that $8 million, once we're done unraveling it all, might change. But that's the way last year's, the current year's budget was built, was in part based on reallocating those funds. So it's really kind of a accounting change. It wasn't new revenue or additional revenue that it was more of a reorganization of the chart of accounts.
Okay, and looking at this, and thank you. It is going to be difficult and I understand, I remember going back and, so it's not what I thought it was. But with this page looks like last year's budget was larger,
right?
$2 million, $2.5 million almost larger than this year's budget. And
Right.
yet we know that that's not true. What is this page telling us?
The best way to look at it, I think, would be to just subtract that $8 million starting fund balance, because it's important to include it for the purposes of transparency and consistency, and making sure that we show here what the budget looked like when it was actually adopted. But from a budget and accounting standpoint, I think the best way to look at this fiscal year's budget is just to subtract that. And so that's why I say this operating budget looks like an expansion compared to last year, because if you subtract that 8 million, it leaves us with, roughly 21 million, which I think is where we were. And it's an increase over that.
Okay, that makes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, Mike and I have had discussions on use of fund balance. And sometimes there's two methodologies on use of fund balance. One, you can project what your year-end fund balance is going to be. If you look at it in May, you think after the end of the audit, I got X amount of fund balance. You can do that, but it's just an estimate. The other option is to go back to the prior year. So if we look at fiscal year 2021 and look at the fund balance at that point, we can utilize some of those fund balances for this coming budget year. So as we move forward, that's how we're going to look at using fund balance. Not for the current year estimate, but the past year actuals. Now, as Michael said, we had to go back and take a look at 101. As you know, basically what we had done over the years is we have expenses shown in 300 water, 500 sewer, and 101 the general fund. What we traditionally are is, in reality, we are a sewer enterprise and a water enterprise. Nothing in between. So what the auditor said to do is go ahead and split that 101. Well, we did that, but then they came back at the last year, during this past year's audit, and said it was done incorrectly. So it was reversed, and now we're going through the process of reallocating the 101. And that's what we're going through in this process. The bottom line is the numbers don't change. It's how it's allocated to different funds. That's all we're doing. And we're coming up with that process right now.
And one other point I just want to touch on there that Jeff mentioned that we have talked quite a bit about is how to account for and utilize the starting fund balance without relying on projections and without creating a dynamic where staff might feel pressure to spend differently at the end of a fiscal year. Not that we do this, and we're very careful not to do this, but to eliminate any potential, pressure to potentially spend differently at the end of a fiscal year, to depending on, what the budget surplus might be at the end of that fiscal year. By relying on the previous fiscal year, you take any of that pressure out, you have certainty as to exactly what that dollar amount is, and you wait until the next fiscal year before you rely on any potential surplus from the current fiscal year. So for example, this year, we're not going to worry about well, not that we're not going to worry about it, but it doesn't change our spending patterns at the conclusion of this fiscal year. based on how that money might be rolled over or utilized in the next fiscal year, because we will wait until the auditor is done and with auditing this fiscal year before we factor that in as the starting fund balance for budget year 23-24. I hope that made sense. Was articulating that perfectly, but that I think would be a conservative way. If we get into the habit of doing that, it's a conservative way to make sure we're not relying on projections, we're relying on actuals, and we're not creating any pressure to potentially change spending patterns throughout the fiscal year.
Can we talk a little bit about the transfers in? That's money coming from our funds, right?
Yeah.
Are you talking about the fiscal 22-23 budget?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
so you're talking about the 6.18
Yeah.
million.
So we need to bring that in, and that's paying for debt service and capital outlay kind of a thing?
Yes, if I may, if you want to jump over to the next page, page number 2 on revenues.
Okay.
On the,
Which one are you using?
On the slide, no.
Slide.
On the slide and also on your budget. But you can go either way.
Should have printed. Did we print?
And
Okay, I'm going to use the slide.
the slides is easier. One of the things to look at here is revenues are broken down into operating revenues, which is basically rate driven, based on our operations. Non-operating revenues, rental income, property taxes, those type of things. And then there's transfers in. Transfers in is, if you're looking at this page of the budget book, it's that, and this towards the bottom of the section. When you're looking at your slide presentation, it's slide number 5.
Gotcha.
They're exact,
Nice.
they're identical. It's just that I broke it up into the slide presentation. So if you look at that from your page 1 of the budget there, you're looking at $6,188,000. That's shown in the budget there, total transfers in for both water and sewer. Water's 300, sewer's 500. So if you go from top to bottom, we have 3.2 million brought in for debt service. That's a new CIP loan, existing loans, ops headquarters loan, and this is the last year paying off the operation headquarters loan. Those type of debt services. The next one is for CIP projects. This is staff support of CIP projects, salaries and benefits and other costs associated with that. Remember, we want to try to show, and for transparency, all our costs within the operating fund. Even though it's spent supporting others, we want to show for transparency, it's all in one fund.
Just hang on a second. You said in there that this is the last year that we're paying off the headquarters loan?
Yes, sir.
Which is a nice, that's a $600,000 debt service payment that will come off the books next year.
Great. And remember, that was an internal fund.
Yeah, so we're paying it back to the funds that we
Right.
took it from.
Correct.
Yes. Great.
It is good news. The next one down line is the operating budget, the operating support. As Michael alluded to, that's the underground utility crew. And those costs associated with it, both salaries and benefits, and also materials, because those show up in the utility budget. Then the next one down is capital outlay. Your budget of $1,042,000. That's we'll get to the capital outlay budget, but it's identifying that's where all those funds are coming from. Remember, years ago, we created the special project fund, which is a portion of property tax money that goes into there. Those are the funds that come in there to use for one-time projects or equipment costs. We're challenged this year in the budget, we truly are. But that's how we're going to fund these capital outlay purchases, both equipment and projects. And then finally, the transfer in from operating for $100,000 from the 108, that's for the rate setting, upcoming rate setting. It's a one-time fee, one-time cost. So that kind of rolls into your $6.2 million of transfers in to support the operating budget.
is on our revenues, have we made an assumption related to our new meters?
It's a great question. We've had some interesting discussions about that among staff. Because I think on one hand, we know we're experiencing in some areas an increase in consumptive billing, because there were a lot of meters out there, more than we realized, I think, that weren't functioning at all or were under-reporting. But on the flip side of that, we have drought restrictions that are being implemented, and we have people reducing their consumption, fixing leaks, and reducing consumption because of that additional cost, that portion of the bill. And we've had some demographic changes and some population changes. So it's a moving target. And so we did make some assumptions, but it's conservative assumptions, and it will be interesting to see how that changes over the next year or two.
It's minimal increase. Remember, during the last year, the rate study, and down at the bottom of page 2 of your handout shows what the increases are. So the water, and this is only base rates, not consumption. Water base rates went up 1.8%, sewer went up 4%. So a combination of rate increases affected this, new meters coming on board, but we also factored in the drought because we knew it was coming, and some more of the accuracy. So bottom line, we really didn't increase the revenues too much because I was afraid of the drought.
But will we have a better idea of the direction that's headed in time for the rate study?
Yes.
I think it's going to be really interesting to see even just over the next few months, how those trends change. It's going to be very hard, and Brad and I have talked about this quite a bit, and along with others. The data that we had before, we know is not very good, and that was part of the reason why we did the project. But I think we will see a change in the trends even in the first 6 months of having this project implemented, and that will give us a much better idea of what to expect forward. But those are all those factors that we talked about. You could probably do a PhD dissertation on how we should project that
in
one
theory,
line
you
item.
could assume it's a bit of a wash, but
And that's kind of where
we also added
was.
some
We're not going
customers
to.
last year. So that was
Right.
one of the first years we've had some, decent construction.
New connections and an increase in the occupancy rate of the second homes and vacation homes. So additional consumption based on that, which is a trend that may or may not continue to the same degree. So all of that taking all of that into account, we ended up not assuming any significant increase in rate revenue.
And if we do see significant increase, we can make adjustments as we move forward. But the goal here is just to do a conservative estimate on revenues. And then the other part of it is, as you mentioned, Director Davidson, to prepare us for this rate plan, the cost of service study. So what we're learning this year will be rolled into that information. And I think having done this a couple times in the past, seeing that you're going to get much more reliable information is going to make that job a lot easier.
I have observed a tremendous increase in the value of homes that they're selling in the county. 20-year-old mobile home on a quarter-acre lot going for $350,000. I would assume that will trickle down to us in the form of a much higher share of the tax revenue from the county. What kind of assumption did you make on that?
We got our projections straight from the county.
Okay.
Within the last 6 weeks.
Okay.
So we use their projections.
But on average, they only go up 1% a year on homes that aren't sold.
Right.
Right. So it's just the new things that sell or significantly different.
Bunch of them. Okay.
Okay, so kind of skipping around a little bit, but this is exactly what I was hoping for, is just let's let the dialogue drive where this goes.
Sure.
Are there any other questions on revenue, which is essentially the first 5 slides? And before we skip ahead to expenditures. So moving to slide 6, just gives us kind of an overview, departmental overview of expenditures. And you see some of the increases, the largest attributed to the utilities department, which is by far our largest department. And that is largely outside of the control of our utilities department. They've actually done a huge amount of work to try to be as lean as possible and cut costs wherever we can. But as the staff report points out, there's a few things driving those increases that are outside of our control. The biggest single increase being, aside from salaries and benefits, which is the utility crew, the biggest single increase is the CPPA power rate increase of 60%. So that for us amounts to about $600,000, which is a big hit to the budget for a single year increase. And then you'll see in several of the other line items that we highlight in the staff report, there's a lot of other areas just in materials and supplies that are where we're seeing inflationary pressure. So some of those line items will increase just to account for where we're at now on the cost of materials and supplies.
What are we estimating just for fuel?
200.
And I just paid $7.49 versus.
Wow.
So
Yikes.
we're at 3, and we budgeted 231 this year. Or I believe we budgeted 255.
For what?
For next year.
Is that fuel for our
255, I don't
diesel?
understand.
Well,
Generators.
one of the things that's reflective of the budget is how dynamic fuel costs have changed since operations.
I just didn't understand the numbers that you just put out there. Are you talking millions or?
Thousand.
No, 255,000.
Oh, okay.
300,000, 280. Sorry.
On this, where is the fuel? I see the fuel
Yeah,
that
so
says
look for-
generators. Where's the other one? There's missing fuel and repair. Oh, I see operating expense, fuel and oil. $254,100 for vehicles.
That's right.
And then, and that's not car repairs. That's just fuel and oil. And then
So-
20,000 set aside for fuel for generators.
Right, and right next to the fuel for the fuel and oil, you will see the repair cost.
That's below it, yeah.
Per budget, yeah.
Well, go ahead with where you're going, and then I want to go to salaries a little bit at some point.
Yeah, so the budget assumes that it will be higher than what we budgeted for this year, but hopefully not at the same level it is right now, but that's something we'll have to monitor as we move forward. I'm sorry for missing part of revenues, but if we can go back to slide 4, I've got a quick question before we go on to Cindy and salaries. What's going on with Hogan? With the board approved income last year, was it 121? It looks like it's gone down to 80. It's less water availability for hydro generation.
And we know, I mean, what's going on and why?
And is that a projection we get from MID, or did we make that projection around? That's the projection we got from MID.
So what's going on in MID? Are they selling less, using less?
That's one of the.
It's just less water available for generation.
Okay.
That might have some curtailment restrictions.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
And we actually see an increase from the Norfolk project, which is interesting. But again, our revenue from the Norfolk project is not tied to actual generation. The increase is because it's tied to inflation. And so that's probably the one line item where, well, maybe some interest income where we actually benefit from from inflation.
Okay, thanks.
If I can ask a question about getting back to the fuel situation. I remember a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, we approved the purchase of the fuel distribution truck from Evans Pass Gas or whatever. Are we still using that?
We still have the truck.
although it's quite old. We bought it really for PSPS implementation. Currently, it's on the discussion block for surplus. Because we haven't seen, this year will really tell the tale because we haven't seen the amount of PSPS events that we did in 2019 in the past couple of years. We have quite an expensive amount of storage out in the field now. So in terms of fuel storage and savings for our vehicles, no, but we do have another 3,000 gallon tank that we have in the warehouse shop that we're in discussion internally about where can we deploy to try to achieve some savings for fuel. Additionally, we have scheduled, and I believe in a couple of weeks, a meeting with another fuel company. So we purchase fuel through WEX. There are a few companies that have reached out to us that are telling us they can save us some money. So we're going to sit down and listen to what they have to say.
Okay, well, I've never heard any discussion specifically about red diesel. Do we purchase red diesel for all these generators we have?
We do have red diesel. We don't. That's a good question for you, Mike. Do we purchase when we have to deliver to the generators? It's not necessarily red.
Some of our sites have red diesel, some of them don't. We got caught in a PSPS you can't mix. So when we need fuel, we use all that fuel out of the vault for our trucks and for generators.
Right.
But we do have red diesel at many of these sites.
Well, that's why I started with asking a question about that fuel truck. If the fuel truck had only red diesel in it, which it has to be $2 a gallon less if there's no tax on it, maybe $2.50. Just use it for that.
Yeah, it's something we can look at for sure.
It was bought for storage. And I don't think we have an operator here that can drive it off-site because we have to have a hazmat license. And I don't think we currently have a Class A driver that has a hazmat endorsement to drive it off-site. So it's currently at Copper and it can be utilized for most of those generators in Copper, but it's not, we don't have an operator to be able to take it out of the road.
What about our deliveries? I mean, can't we have one delivery specific for just to top off all generators with the red fuel?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, the point you will take, I mean, in consideration of the cost, look at rearranging how we operate out the field.
It's going to get worse.
And what we've done a lot in the past is we've taken advantage of those companies to just fuel sites. So, yeah, we can definitely look at that.
Well, having protected fuel tanks, I mean, the double walled, those are pretty expensive to buy, but I don't know, just do me a favor and maybe report back next time about what you found out about, I don't want you to spend more money than it's going to save, obviously, but I think that there's I never bought any red fuel when I had a fleet of off-road vehicles and generators and stuff, but I would now, definitely would now.
Last time fuel spiked up like this, there was an IRS check station down in Linden that was checking everybody's fuel.
Well, so that's the thing too, is no mistakes. Staff can't make a mistake and accidentally, because when you get checked, it's there. I mean, it's gonna be there a few tanks later too. Yeah, but we can definitely report back.
Okay, thank you.
One other item I want to discuss, if it's okay, unless there's any other questions, but one item just to point out, and we talk about this on page 2 of the staff report, is the third-party processing cost for credit card transactions, which is something Director Takeda has talked about quite a bit in the past, and we've seen those costs go up. And so we discussed it at Finance Committee a couple weeks ago, and the budget assumes that we will start passing those costs through to customers next month, I think is what we're going to try to do. It takes time to implement that, but we're also going to do a lot of outreach to customers in advance to make sure they know there is a free option, and try to get, make sure people are aware that that additional cost is coming and that there's a free way to do it. So we're going to push out a lot of outreach and education on that front to customers. But for customers that choose to continue to use credit cards or debit cards for their automatic payments or any payments, I think it would, the cost of that transaction will now be passed through to the customer. And bit of history on that I wasn't aware of until recently was the district actually did that up until 2008. The cost was passed through to the customer, and in 2008 it was changed, which I suspect was probably due to trying to find some assistance or some way to help people during that hard economic time. But so this is kind of going back to where we were prior to 2008, it's passing that cost through to customers.
I would predict that you're going to get a hue and cry from people that will say, you mean I can't get my airline miles?
Well, they still can.
Oh, yeah,
but
not
they're
for
going to have
us.
to pay for it.
Yeah. That's a huge savings. What you guys are
Where is it
doing.
at? Where is it on our budget?
I talk about it on
It's gone.
page 2 of the staff report. It's the second to last bullet point, but we've just, like I said, we've seen that cost increase over time.
I think one of them was like $80,000 a year.
Yes.
Well,
One line item, and I kept,
Page 2 on
Not
here,
like it.
page 2 on.
page 2 of the staff report.
Staff report.
Whereabouts is it in the chart in our?
It shows up in a couple of different line items. I don't have them off the top of my head here, but
but you can read about it on page 2 of
Of 6.
the agenda item type paperwork.
Right,
more
I got
narrative.
that. I got
yeah.
that.
Page 21.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So there's a couple of different line items where that shows up. It used to be the total cost was only around $80,000 when we brought this to Finance Committee a couple of years ago. And there was some discussion about the trade-offs. If the trade-off is that it requires additional staff time to process those payments, then we want to continue to incentivize customers to sign up for automatic payments. Where's that balance? But as we've seen these costs increase over time, staff's recommendation now is to pass that cost along to the customer and also make sure the customers are aware that there's a free alternative out there.
Jeff, we're looking at page 2, but I'd like to direct your attention to 3 of 6 at the bottom of the page there. I really don't analyze this with a magnifying glass, but there's a typo there.
You made us turn our pages to that.
Because of the typo?
The last paragraph, overall of fiscal year 22-23 debt service budget is 2,000 greater than fiscal year 22-23. So could be 21-22 on the second part of that sentence.
Okay.
Not that we're going to see that again.
That's my mistake.
I am. That's why.
No, I appreciate you pointing it out because I try to avoid typos. But that's correct.
And under the VACON truck loan of 2020 and the VACON truck loan of 2021, do we actually have 3 VACON units? Or
We have 2 VACONs in operation and a gap backs. We have loans on 2 of those. Yeah, so we have the gap backs, I want to say in 2019,
okay,
and then VACON last,
okay.
actually 2020, but it's
What's the difference between a gap back and a VACON?
brand. Yeah, and then the gap backs is international. Yes, and then the VACON is a Freightliner.
Okay.
Yeah,
People ask me, what are we doing with all these cement trucks?
Oh,
4 trucks.
Are we doing that much cement work? And I said, do you have all?
I want to mention, do you follow how the breakdown goes on these line items? Because at our finance meeting, remember who had told me how to look at this? Because it's pretty overwhelming. So it's really laid out nicely. I just have to be told how to look at it.
Well, tell me how to look.
Okay, so let me get with it
No,
because
go
it
for it.
really is so much good
That's great.
information. So in the beginning here, you have like, let me get to there. So this is,
You're in my space.
okay, are you okay? You know, so this is like all departments kind of thing. And then when I was asking, well, how much, you know, where's computers, whatever. And when you get back here, here's all the departmental breakdown. So
Okay.
I just did this for me. So I put, so Department 54 is utilities,
Uh-huh.
and I can go here and it's all broken down. It's very, very awesome, but I was lost until you guys see where I'm going with it. And we could all look at it after the meeting because we're not making an approval. But I do have some questions, but you know, just on the salaries, but it was really good because it gives you Department 54 and what it is. And it breaks down for you how much they're spending on computers, whatever.
So you should share with them how they put the 54 up on top.
So I had to put my like department names because I'm not familiar with the numbers, but I was able to do it.
You cracked the code.
I
There
did.
we go. And the idea behind this is to show, to share with your board how we come up with these
Yeah,
numbers.
so
And so each department goes through each line item and project what their costs are for the different services within that line item.
Multiple times over.
Multiple times over, we go over time and time again.
This
That
one
way,
right here
you can see what's involved in each one. Now, when we do the final
Here's the
budget,
total,
it's gonna be
right,
rolled up by
in
line item,
Department
but
50.
now you have the detail. And it goes to great, and this is how we've always done it. It's just the first time we've shown you all the detail.
Yeah, well, you've never presented it before, and
Like this.
I was really excited about it because I had been asking for this. And it just helped me. You may have to go back and forth a little bit, but because this one right here gives us the total, you know, how much we're spending on power, you know, broken down by departments. But when I got to, and it was probably computers, I wanted to look and see, well, why does that department need so much or what have you? It just worked out really nice.
Right, and for reference point, there's two ways you can look at this one. For the expenditure side, in your budget book that was handed out, not the PowerPoint, but the budget book. Pages 3, 4 are all the expenditures rolled out
Yes.
by department, as President Zepeda had mentioned, across the top, and then it's by line item. The PowerPoint, I couldn't put all this on one portrait. I had to go landscape and break it up just so you could see it. But if you go across the top, if you're looking at the top of page 3, and this is where I think Director Cicada, President Cicada gave you the names, did the cheat sheet. Department 50, that's non-departmental. And when you go into the details, those are the green sheets in the back. It shows both the name and the department number, so that's how you can cross-reference. Department 54 is general management. Utilities, I'm sorry, 56 is general management, 57 is your budget, the board, 58 is engineering, 59 is admin services, and 60 is water resources.
Yep. Once they inform me of how to look, but on my defense though, some of the pages were in a weird kind of order, so we had to go back and forth, but it was really helpful.
But this gives you the roll-up of all the detail that's on the green sheets. It all feeds into that. That way you can see on a district-wide level where we are. And what's nice about this too is if you look on the far right-hand column on pages 3 and 4, you get to see the variances from last year's budget to this year's budget. Is it an increase or it's a decrease? It's the biggest.
So I've been looking at these ones. In fact, maybe we should just jump to salaries at the moment. I'm looking at this right here. We have a $12 million and change salary. And the current fiscal year was 10 million. So I'm looking at this one right here. And one of my questions is, page 7 of the printout of the handout.
The PowerPoint?
Yeah. So out of the salaries, and I don't care what department, but I believe that you do pull out money from the R&R funds to offset some of the expense, right? Do we have any idea of what percentage of that is? And what I'm trying to do is get a, what is our payroll percentage of income? And I don't want to include any R&R expense or income. I'm
Well, I
looking
think
at
it's
the
okay to
revenue.
include it because it's offset by a transfer in of R.
Right, so of the
Correct me if I'm
salaries,
wrong on that, Jeff.
of the salaries, how much of our R&R is used to pay for salaries?
I don't have that in front of me. I can dig down into it.
I'm just
But just to
curious.
get you just as an example,
Mhm.
the underground utility crew, which is about $500,000.
Is that 54?
85% of it is covered by.
Okay,
R&R.
that was a question. 85, and the utilities department 54, that's the underground utilities department.
Yes,
And you're saying about 85%
85% of their salaries and benefits are covered by.
by the R&R.
Of just
That's
those,
huge
of just
for me.
those 4 staff members.
Yeah.
It's not the whole department.
Yes, just the 4 staff members.
Right.
Okay.
So the utilities department has a staff of 45-ish, right?
No,
Okay.
they have 51.
51. So
Good.
for the underground crew, we made an assumption that a higher percentage of that was going to be funded, which is consistent with when we created that crew back in November. We estimated about 85% billed to the R&R projects, or paid for with R&R funds. That there's, to a lesser degree, other utility crew staff. Engineering is where it's a higher percentage.
So out of those 51 employees, 4 of those employees, their salaries, 85% of their salaries are paid with R&R.
Yes.
On the water side.
I had asked this before and I've yet to totally find it for like public utilities. But like in the private, you generally want to operate, maybe you can ask me what you do on your labor. You know, there's a certain percentage of revenue that you want for your labor. And then after that is your other costs. And I'm wondering if we have a percentage for our industry that you use for labor. So like, and I wasn't using any R&R income. I just used the regular rates income and the other income. And that put us at using a 12 million for payroll. We're at 60% of revenue. And so I backed out $1 million, I think you said, about what we put in from the R&R. So now we're at 55%, which I think is a good number. But I'm wondering, does anybody know what that number is? How can we find that? I haven't found it, but is there like a goal you want to be at no more than 60% for the water sewer industry? Because I want to keep an eye on that as we look at when we're hiring more people. You know, we want to make sure we stay within whatever that percentage, that magic number is. And then the other thing that I wanted to say in your narrative, you have budgeted for a potential new hire for the water resources and the IT. It's in the budget, but when we pass this budget, it does not approve those hires yet, correct?
And no, that would not be correct. So two issues there. One is the percentage, you know, just generally speaking, and this is going to vary from one agency to the next, but generally speaking, if our labor cost was 60% of our operating budget, I would be concerned. I would
Well, you're at 55.
start to get more concerned if it was higher than that.
You're at 55.
Well, I think we're less than that, because I don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong on how you would calculate that, Jeff, but I don't know that you want to make the subtraction for R&R because, like I said, that R&R revenue is transferred into the operating budget. So it's offset. So there's that increase in the operating budget because of those new positions, but it's offset by that R&R revenue.
Either way, I wanted to know if we had no R&R fund income, what is it based on, just rate revenue and, you know, other income like, you know, our property taxes or whatever. So I backed out $1 million of salaries to sort of offset any R&R income having to put in. And that puts us at 55%, give or take, you know.
Well, R&R is
whatever.
all rates.
I guess I'm
Would you
not sure where the
pull some out of the
55%
rates?
came
We pull
from.
money out of the rates to put, we don't hear you there. Let's just move on. I'll talk with you after that.
I think we're under 50%. But
And
Perfect.
honestly,
Perfect.
yeah, it's I worked in the city of Folsom for a while,
What was it? What was theirs?
65.
Yeah. Well,
And you
I,
had public safety and other things.
And you had some control of that?
Oh,
anyhow, we need to have that as some kind of a benchmark, Michael.
yes, it's something that
I
we
agree.
can look at as we
Yeah.
move forward.
You know, okay, so with that being said, so my other comment was,
Okay, so on that point, I'm sorry, I can answer that question or did you want to?
the 55% and all that stuff?
No, so
Because
on
that's
those two
done.
new
I'm done with that.
positions, couple of things to point out. One is in that, in the staff report on page 2, in those bullet points I talked about, where we highlight differences, there's a decrease of $165,000 on professional services. That would be offset. That's assuming we add these 2 new positions. If we don't add those 2 new positions, we would have to go back and increase some line items on consultants. But with those 2 new positions, the way that the preliminary budget is drafted and the draft personnel allocation is in here as well, those 2 positions would be included and the personnel allocation would be adopted by the board at the time the budget is adopted. And so those 2 new positions would be funded for next fiscal year.
So I thought I had asked that I didn't want those 2 positions being approved at the time of budget. You can go ahead and budget for it, that way it's there just in case, but I wanted them brought back to the full board. So for the water resources, we want to have another person in there. Has the full board heard about that yet?
Just in the staff report.
No, so this is when we wanted to have that discussion. So we have a detailed, the appendices to the staff report include detailed memos for each of those positions.
Something that I'm trying to avoid that I feel tends to happen, and that's why I was looking for more detail. I know I haven't been here that long, but just because we approve a budget, I want to make sure things don't come back to me and say, oh, well, you approved it in the budget, so we got it. That's why I wanted to see detail. So as far as the hiring 2 more staff, I would like to have, unless you folks are okay with approving the 2 new hires. I don't have a problem with water resources, but I'm still not certain if the IT is ready for their assistant. So if we approve this, that means I'm approving that IT person, which
That's
I
the way
want to
this
be
is.
able-
That's the way this is presented. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way, but if.
We're not here for the approval today anyway, but.
No, but I think this is the time to have that discussion.
Okay, so how does everybody?
I think it's a great point, Cindy. And they are two big things. One of them, one establishing, do we have the money and the wherewithal to even do it? And then the second would be going into detail on when it comes time that we need those positions and it's time to hire the position as to the why and take a deep dive there. And if we don't do it, fine, we got extra money in the budget, can do an adjustment. But I agree, that is, there's enough meat on the bone here to go through dollars and cents on both sides of the equation, the expenses
And we've only talked about these 2 new hires, I think, only in the finance department. You were there for one, and then we had water resources brought up the last one.
I think it makes sense to divide them.
Well, can I just point out, so that level of detail is included in your packet. So
Right. I'm just saying
attachment A
it's
to
a
the
whole lot.
budget memo.
I agree with Cindy. It's a whole lot to take in with all the entire budget for the year and looking at every department and looking at all the expenditures and all the revenues and going into this much detail. That's enough of a dive for a day, if you will, to take on at one time. I think it's reasonable that to take a deeper dive into the why we need that person and when that time comes, like we've done in the past. I really like how we did the underground crew. It wasn't just a budget thing that we just threw it in there. And we got the money for it, let's just do it. We took a deep dive into why and when and where or what they're going to do.
So we're not trying to just throw it in. We're not trying to gloss over it by any means.
I don't think anyone's pointing a finger at anybody. I like that process that she's brought up a lot better than the one that.
Generally, we try to avoid that. Generally, we try to budget for it and at the beginning of the year. And if it comes up during the year, then we may have a separate standalone discussion.
I like budgeting for it and then having a discussion as to when to pull the trigger, if we're even gonna pull the trigger. Budgeting is something totally different than it's time to make the expense.
And one of the thing with the expense, it's a new hire, which is a huge expense to the district forever. And just because it's in the budget this year, maybe we haven't thought it out or in our minds, you know, what the need is. And
So I think I think from the staff perspective, we have thought it out. We tried to include a lot of detail in the staff report. We're prepared to just, address any questions that the board has about those two positions today. I think the way that we built this and the way we proposed it would be to include those two new positions because we think we're at a point where we really need them. And so it's funded in the budget. The budget is balanced. It assumes, we are very cognizant of the fact that that means this is a long-term commitment to these two positions. We don't take that lightly. But that is the discussion I was hoping to have as a part of the budget adoption, not taken separately. But we can do it. We can do it however.
I would like to pull them out separately and do that as a separate line item in an agenda. Because one, I'm leaning yes on one, no on the other. So now what? And I think it would be fair to be able to have them separate when we have more time, as to perhaps why I don't want one over the other.
I guess I would ask if we have, I think we have time.
I don't like it. I look like it's buried in the budget and I would like to have it for transparency. We talk about transparency. I think it should be as a separate agenda item.
Cindy, you and I have spoke on the subject, which isn't a, and Michael said you could do it either way. What does the engineering committee think?
Well, what would it look like? Would we just have to do, take those positions out of this budget and then add it to the agenda afterwards and then do a budget adjustment if we chose to go that route?
I would say leave them in the budget. That way we're set aside for it, but we take a look at it outside of the budget process. It's a very important decision for every employee they hire because it is an expensive commitment for a long, long time. And I think we should be looking at, the employee that called the table, shows everybody organizational chart, all those kinds of things. And I think separately is just a more transparent way to do it.
Michael, you included some verbiage in here on both of these positions that it would be months before they could be filled.
Well, I think that's just based on recruiting. So if the personnel allocation and the budget were approved as presented, we would start recruiting immediately.
Like
for both of those positions.
So the ads are already keyed up and ready to. Staff
are eager to move forward if those are approved as a part of the budget. But we certainly were not trying to. We've made a point to highlight it in the staff report and in the separate memos that were included attached to the staff report that go into great detail as to the cost, the justification, all of the details as to why we think the positions are needed now. We were hoping to have that discussion as a part of budget approval, which I think is, incorporating staffing changes for the upcoming fiscal year. It's not unusual to include that in the budget development process.
So at the finance meeting, I wanted to see the job descriptions for those two. So sure. Where are those?
We can provide those. We do have draft job descriptions for both. That's not something that normally comes to the board, but we're happy to provide those.
If this is, it kind of falls in the realm of a polling of the board, two of my colleagues say that they want to talk about these later, but neither of them expressed a desire to withhold those funds from the budget. But delaying that for another 2 weeks, bring it back for a more focused discussion, I'm in favor of that.
Yeah, leave the money in the budget. Just
I agree. Rusty said it very nicely. And I think a similar situation is On page 4 of 6, in the end of staff report, we're talking about approximately $17 million for projects. I don't think today we're authorizing, write a check for 17 million for all our projects we're planning on doing this year.
No, because under the purchasing policy and just as a matter of practice, we wouldn't put any contract above $100,000. But
So I think it's just a similar, in my mind, it's similar to that. It's in the budget, but there's another step that we need to take to check it and take a deeper dive into that 17 million. I think it's fair to do that.
We can do that. Happy to do it. Generally, we don't do that with staffing. If it's included in the budget and the personnel allocation, that's the authorization to move forward. But we can bring this back at the first, well, so would a separately agendized item at the June 22nd meeting when we are going to adopt the budget satisfy that, or would you prefer to see it in July?
I think she said it very nicely that it shouldn't be a part of the budget process.
So let's make it in July.
But it
and
shouldn't
have-
be a part of the budget. So this.
No, separate.
They have job descriptions and your organizational chart. I think the job descriptions are really important for me, just because there's the IT department. To me, I'd like to see, I'm not certain that I'm on board with it, so I'd like to see what everybody's doing it, yeah. I just don't take hiring new employees lightly, and since we're talking about employees, what's
We're
going on?
spending more time
with-
on that. We've given direction. Let's.
Yeah, but wait, what's going on with the Director of Financial Services?
So that is an update. I'm not prepared to give an
Okay,
open session.
do we
at this
have a
point.
budget in here for Director of
Yes, we
Finance?
do.
Okay.
But we are prepared to have the detailed discussion if we want to take a deeper dive on either of those positions. We can address those questions or concerns here today. We can bring it back in July. I'm a little, I think in the past, there's been some misunderstandings about the personnel allocation. If we adopt it with positions that we're not authorizing yet,
You can make that happen.
we'll figure out how to bring that back. to
So
July and
do we
wait.
have any more questions on the budget, or are we good to just, we're not asking for anything today? Any more questions?
Sorry, I don't want to step on the line, but I suppose I certainly want to respect the board's opinion here, but as one of the people requesting that FTE, I'd just like to ask for perhaps some board direction in this. Part of my request for the FTE comes from a large savings on professional services budget. I'm happy to come back with justification, job descriptions, but for purposes of budgeting this time, it's going to be awfully hard to put it into salaries, benefits, those GL codes, and then ultimately, if not approved by the board, have to somehow cover what I'm now missing in professional services for all the reporting requirements, everything else I have to offset. I can tell you just open and honestly that all these work with the slurry line, new Hogan transfers, all these projects and programs I'm working on are just going to come to a screeching halt because all my time is going to go towards reporting.
Well,
So I can just.
honestly, what you presented the finance committee
Yeah.
for Brad's, I support that. But I still want to see job descriptions.
Okay.
And I think, the Water Resources Department, you had alluded to a lot of things going on. I forget what it was. There's more being tacked on for him from DWR. So I support that. And
I think to Brad's point, though, I think in either case, it would probably require a budget adjustment if we were, so
We were
if
to
the
not-
budget is built right now.
If in July, we were to not approve it.
If the budget is built right now under the assumption that those two positions are going to take on tasks that are either currently outsourced or additional work that we know we need to do that we would have to outsource. So if we're not budgeting for those, and that's why I pointed out, started by pointing out that line item in page 2 of the staff report that in
Okay,
the
but-
aggregate, there's about 100 and, let's see.
Well, this is a good
Right, so you
example.
have it in
I haven't heard Brad's
Yeah.
presentation to the finance committee
Yeah.
yet, and Cindy has,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
she's very, very comfortable with it.
So the thing is you
I'd
have
like
to
to hear
look
that
at
in
the
July.
salaries. If we approve water resources and not IT, we just take some of the salary and reallocate it to the professional services. It's not, you guys have reallocated stuff
Right.
before.
We would
So-
have to, I think we would, yeah, there would be some budget adjustments.
But in the
we can
meantime,
do
if
that.
it most likely, I'm going to guess, will be approved, guessing, predicting, but we're looking at 1 month, Brad. The reporting that's going to take between now and some Wednesday in July.
Okay.
I guess
Yeah,
my
sure.
assumption was we would have
Open
that
to,
discussion here, but
Would you be open to reconsidering on Brad's position that Brad is requesting?
In July.
No,
I'll just say I support.
Yeah.
I believe you have the support. I think what I would like to see is more of a transparency for ratepayers and any member of the public that just because we did this budget, they can start hiring employees. That's a huge cost for the district for a long, long time. And I know as the ratepayer, I think at some point, employee costs could be an issue. So I would like to make sure that we just show that we've done our due diligence.
I just want to address the transparency point really quickly, because I completely agree that that is really important, which is why we focus on that in the staff report. We highlight staffing changes, which we would always do in budget development. We highlight those staffing changes. We included separate, very detailed memos on those staffing changes and the rationale for them. There's no attempt here to try to like slip these into the budget with a lack of transparency. We also prioritize that.
But see, I want to say, I don't believe you are doing anything like that for any bad reason. But when you have somebody just looking at a ratepayer, looking at the agenda, it doesn't say anything about new hires, you know, oh, so they're going to read all this budget? Perhaps not. It just.
No, but I think it's typical to have new staffing changes incorporated in the budget
So
discussion.
perhaps we might change that. We'll see. Anyhow, let's move on.
Yeah, to leave her point, I just want to acknowledge that judging by what I'm hearing now, I will be patient and follow that, and I appreciate the preliminary support.
Yes. So any other questions for the budget? Are we ready to move forward? Any more questions for anybody?
And Cindy, your comment, maybe we should look into a policy to address this exact question, might be something that we talk about in the future. And maybe in the finance committee, you bring a future agenda item for the finance committee.
I can ask for that. All right, no more questions for Jeff or Michael on the budget. I mean,
Brad, don't lose any sleep.
Well, I'll do my best.
all righty, so we're done with the budget workshop. The budget workshop. Thank you, and I know you have all put in a lot of effort into this, and I appreciate it. I said it last time. I like that. I like that detail. It's great. Thank you. It's helping me.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right. So, and you'll bring that back for approval next meeting?
So the plan, the process would be, we'll bring the budget back for approval at the next meeting. And then
new hires, the first one in July.
And then we'll discuss new hires the first meeting.
Perfect. Okay. Reports. 7A, report on the May operations engineering departments. That would be Mr. Damon. We haven't seen you all day. How come?
There's been some time here where you guys haven't been able to see one of these presentations, so I thought it would be the perfect meeting to have a very long, I'm just kidding. It's been pretty big.
Yeah, we have told you that you're limited to 3 minutes,
Yeah,
right?
I'll
Want to make sure.
I'll move quickly. While the PowerPoint's being brought up, I just want to highlight the fact that we do have a brand new glass line steel tank online as part of the Redwood tank replacement project. This tank furthest up the hill, Big Trees Village, tank 8, some would call it tank 6. So that's that project's moving forward. We're seeing some resolution. We're in the midst of building the header tank, so it's taken a little bit of time. The material supply issues, as you all can imagine, have wreaked havoc on some of our projects and their timing. They're moving forward.
What street is that on up there?
That is up in SPI property.
Oh, on the other side of the, okay.
Right.
Kind of across from Miko, is it?
Somewhat, yeah,
Okay.
a little bit up and across, yeah, right? Yeah, sure, let me try this. Did it go? Did it move? Okay. Wanted to highlight, here, let me go back really quick. So we had service saddle on a 10-inch water main in Gold Creek get up. You can see that rubber there on the tap saddle. Blew out, crews came in. This is distribution crew work effort. Went ahead and replaced that. Just continuing to highlight the fact that, we're always working to repair water mains and replace and repair service laterals. This one, as you can see, is quite deep. There's some shoring that was
How
involved.
old is that, you think?
Shoot, Gold Creek, it's not, what is that, early 2000s, I want to say?
No problem.
Yeah. But if you see the tap there,
40, 50.
and so, yeah, about 20, but what's interesting is on the picture on the left, when you look at where the black rubber is that's come out of the service saddle, you see that indent. That is the water spraying over time, eroding that C900 plastic pipe away.
Wow.
So that's an actual divot. And you'll see that a lot when you pull out a section of pipe that's been replaced where the water is spraying at pressure. It'll just be rippled or, our guys do great work. These are two Hymax couplings, the picture on the right in the midst of the shoring with the reconnected tap saddle. So that's the repair. Always do great work. Can't say enough great things about this crew. This is the genuine distribution crew again. This is a service line install, crossing a driveway.
Is that a vac on or the other one?
That is the Gap Vax.
Okay, there it is.
The Gap Vax is the beast. It's a big machine. And you can see the picture on the right, just right there in the middle of the sunlight is the gas line.
Ooh.
So our crews are always working to navigate around other underground utilities. And in consideration of the fact that this is a driveway, the crew went ahead and put in a piece of PVC to sleeve that line so that in the future, here, let me go back. In the future, if there's an issue on that service line, we can just slide it right through the sleeve and we're done. So we don't have to go disrupting the property owner's driveway anymore. You can see the sleeve, the white PVC on the right with the service line going through it to the water meter.
Damon, when you're calling a service line, that's the main line, not the lateral, or is that the customer's
It's the lateral. So I would call the service line, service lateral, same.
Yeah.
Whether it's on the customer side or the district side, I'll try to define. But in that case, I'm talking about our side of the service lateral from the main.
Gotcha.
And so I wanted to highlight some of the work that our underground crew started with right out of the gate, which was actually a water main replacement along the South Court in Rancho. This line, the main, countless leaks. Our distribution crews out there all the time replacing and repairing sections. And so the underground crew actually worked with the construction crew. We had the super crew, the action hero, so to speak, or all the little parts come together and create the giant superhero, right? What is that, Ultraman or whatever? So they did a great job. And I wanted to show you kind of the before and after. So you can see kind of looking at the road, it just kind of tells you what kind of issues we would experience out there. But if you look at the before, and the excavation and all the work that goes into prepping the trench, and then the next picture where everything is being cleaned, the image on the left, you can see the trench and the install happening and pushing dirt back. And then the image on the right is brushed, the road is brushed, base rocks in the shoulder. Our crews even went ahead and cut the bank to clean it up and eliminate any issues that the county might experience with, erosion, and then we get the heck out of there. So I just can't say enough great things about our crews. Highlight a little bit more of what our electrical crew does. So this is some conduit installed on the new fire tank in Sheep Ranch with telemetry and level control and level indication in the pull boxes on the top and the image on the right, and the pull box on the left, or in the picture on the left. And this is inside the small treatment plant at Sheep Ranch. So this is the whole, all the electrical components, all the relays and wiring, and then the human machine interface panel on the right. So this actually, we were able to improve the automation of the Sheep Ranch treatment plant during this process also, and we included remote operation. So there's actually a video camera inside the building so treatment plant operators can see what's going on. They can look at and verify the parameters for the treatment facility, turbidity, chlorine residual, whatnot, visually, and then they can turn the plant on and off remotely. So that's definitely an improvement to that facility. Installation of a belt press pump at the Arnold wastewater treatment facility. Just an indication of some of the working conditions that folks have to experience. So this is next to the belt press. There's a lot of solids that go through that belt press. So there's a lot of overspray, I guess you can call it, that is in the building. So when you're working on a pump, sometimes you have to make friends with overspray.
It'd be so nice if the new equipment could stay looking like that. It's so nice.
Yes, right, yes.
Because overspray is a lot better in the water world than this.
Yeah,
wastewater
yes,
world. Yeah.
that's true. And you know what, that is a topic of conversation. Speaking of the gap vacs, you keep your flexible hoses intact on the Vector trucks, because when it goes from water to sewer, there's nothing worse than having a pinhole leak in one of those lines. And we hear about that. So this is odor control. The lift station 13 in Poker Flat. We would experience odor issues. It's in a cul-de-sac. All the neighbors around that lift station can smell the lift station. So we installed an odor control unit, which is essentially a 55-gallon drum with anthracite. We've talked about this in the past, with a blower on it. So we installed one of those, put a 55-gallon drum in there, filled it full of anthracite, and plumbed it to the air vent of the wet well of the lift station. And then naturally, as usually what happens with situations like this, is now it's not smelly, but it's noisy. So then we were trying to take advantage of the foam rocks that are built in Angels Camp, but we couldn't find one that was big enough to cover the odor control unit. So it would just look like a big styrofoam boulder, which is what the neighbor has covering their propane tank. But we settled for a doghouse, outhouse type structure, nice. And it turned out great. I have, the mechanics and our facilities maintenance tech, George, worked on this together, and they did a great job. And the end product looks great.
And then what do you do? Insulate the inside of the little building?
Yeah, and then work to match the paint of the neighbor's house and the roofing material of the neighbor's house. And they can't hear it and they can't smell it. And so
it looks really nice.
Yeah, so
should have made it a little bigger. We could have leased it out.
yeah, that's a great.
A VRBO.
That's true.
It looks like that there are handles on the top of that thing. You can just lift the whole top off, or what?
Yeah, you can actually lift the whole top off, because if there's an issue with the 55-gallon drum and not just the media, the hope is that we can lift the top off and literally use the Vector truck to suck all the old dead media out and then just pour the new in. So we can just drive up, take the top, suck it out, put new in, and be about our business.
How's the that tank in Copperopolis that you took me to? Is it still holding up?
It is holding up. So, well, it changes by the day. So we had a leak repair crew come in, dive the tank, and patch it internally. And that really worked for about 3 weeks.
That's not like our crews, right?
No.
Yeah.
So we, this year's budget with our tank cleaning budget, we had a fair amount of money in there that we were able to call them out. We usually have a little bit in case there's an issue with a tank, and because they can come inside both steel and redwood tanks and patch internally with, I call it mastic. I forget, but we all call it something a little bit different.
So is there still a pond outside there?
There is, but it's not as deep. Right. And so we actually,
we're getting on that one, I think.
And we are prepared, now that we have design engineer secured and they're working on the design to replace the tank, we are prepared if we have to take the tank offline. With redwood tanks, though, if you make that decision,
no going back.
Right. There's usually, you can't go back, because once those staves dry, it's really hard to soak them again and get them to seal. So, right. And they could fall in on themselves. So we're trying not to do that until we know that we're getting close to construction. Yeah.
Very good. All right. Any
Thank you all.
questions for Damon?
Thank you, Damon.
Appreciate it.
Good job, everybody. All right. General Manager's report.
Okay, a couple of items. If I could circle back, we kind of wrapped up that budget discussion really quickly. So just a couple of quick points on budget, going back to that. One is we didn't really talk much about the CIP, and it's obviously a huge, really critically important part of the budget that is included in here. It represents a significant increase on previous years because of, the rate of project implementation and the additional funding that we have. But we've gone back through it many times over. Ops and engineering staff have done a phenomenal job, both in drafting and developing that CIP budget, but also in getting us into a position where we're actually, poised to implement and increase the rate of project delivery significantly. So I just didn't want to gloss over that too quickly, because that's a huge part of the budget that will be before the board on the 22nd as well. So please let us know if we have any.
I'd say perhaps if anybody has any questions, they can call you offline.
Or
and talk to you about it.
we're prepared to talk about it today if anybody has questions about that as well. But yeah, at any time. And then also, I just want to circle back quickly on the staffing positions. It is something that would be separately agendized if we were to bring it back on the 22nd, because it would require side letters with the bargaining units. So it would be a separately agendized item if there was any concern about transparency. So I don't know if that addresses the transparency concern. It definitely would be called out as its own item on the agenda.
Agendize it in July, please.
Okay. Legal affairs met this week. I think the reason why I bring it up, in addition to just tracking legislation, one is just, I think, highlighting that Mia is doing a great job. We've had some recent success in the lobbying effort to bring in additional federal funds for Copper Cove wastewater treatment plant. The Army Corps did include the $1 million that Congress had already appropriated into their work plan. So we're in the process of implementing that. Senator Padilla has included a request in WRDA 2022 for the increase in our Section 219 authorization from 3 million to over 13 million, which is a huge need. It's one of the big gaps that we still have in CIP funding. And Senator Feinstein included a funding appropriation request for this upcoming budget of 2.5 million for the Pond 6 dam raise, which is not all that we had asked for, but it is a big step in the right direction, and there's the possibility of increasing that dollar amount as we move forward. So 3 really big developments on that front that are as a result of many years of effort to fund those projects. We've had some really positive, I think, recent meetings with NCPA, increasing our coordination, in addition to slurry line discussions, increasing our coordination on the North Fork project and moving into that negotiation. So there'll be more to come on that in the near future. The GSA will probably see an item before the board in the near future, amending the MOU that we have between our 4-member agency GSA to enable us as the GSA to make determinations of consistency for well application permits. So the new governor's executive order requires GSAs to make consistency determinations with the groundwater sustainability plan for any well permit applications that are more than just a residential well.
And that's for public wells.
What's that?
Like wells like CCWD wants or something like that.
Bigger than anything over 2 acre feet, anything over bigger than a single family residence, basically.
Oh.
So that requires that determination, and our GSA just doesn't have the structure to deliver that, unfortunately, which is a much bigger conversation that is also happening. But at least in the short term, we don't want to hold up well permit applications because the GSA doesn't have the ability to make that determination. So that should be coming before the board here soon. Other than that, 4th of July preparations are underway. We're planning on being in the Arnold Parade again, but if other directors have requests or recommendations for how CCWD can participate in the community. We're also working on a lot of other outreach activities, I guess, events. and including just some smaller events instead of trying to focus on town halls, which we don't always get turnout. We're looking at the possibility of just doing a pop-up in front of a grocery store, for example, and if people want to come and ask questions about CCWD, being available for that. So staff are doing a great job of coming up with some innovative ideas to get us out into the public more.
That's great, because I don't have any grocery stores in my district.
No, but you have grocery shoppers.
What about,
Maybe a person market or something.
Michael, what about plans for, I call it like the employee appreciation party, using those funds from JPIA? Are we moving forward?
Yeah, we're still, we don't have a date or anything yet, and we still want to get the CCWD 75th birthday party back.
Can we incorporate that with
might
the
be,
employee
I think that might be
appreciation?
the direction we go in, so, yeah.
And using those
more to come
funds.
on that. Yeah. Yeah,
And
the
they-
budget does include a small increase in the funding for the wellness committee and for the purchase of training, safety and safety training, safety equipment and safety training that we are attributing to that the refund that we got from JPIA. So trying to make sure we funnel that back directly to staff that are responsible for the reward.
Absolutely. That's why I want that party. I want to meet everybody. I only know the people that come here. So,
Curtailments? Can you say something about that?
Do you want to say something about that? Brad wants to say something
No,
about
no.
curtailments.
No water resources manager report, unfortunately, so I appreciate Michael.
would you
providing
like
me
us
some of his
to?
time.
Do we need to?
That's up to you all. I've got plenty to say, as you know, but curtailments were the big thing that just hit yesterday. Entire Calaveras River watershed, which includes things San Antonio, White Pines, pre-14 post, doesn't matter, all curtailed. We're able to rely on New Hogan for Jenny Lind. It doesn't change that, but now Sheep Ranch, for instance, is just coming out of White Pines. We got to use whatever was stored there. Other side, McCulmy River watershed. Fortunately, last year we were diving into the pre-14 claim to Bear Creek. We established that because everything after 1900 now has been curtailed. So we're protected because of that claim. We can still divert from Bear Creek. Everything on the Stanislaus has been curtailed after 1900 as well. We're relying on New Spicer Meadow there, as you know, and some of our other storage facilities. So we're okay from previously stored water. We're going to have to rely on CPUD agreement eventually. More to follow with that in a future agenda item, but curtails are here as we expected, and we'll do our best to track and monitor.
You know, if we can't get him in here for his own little report, you know, with what you just said, if you could put that in an email and shoot it to us, it would be helpful for me, just.
We'll find a way to incorporate it into.
Yeah, because that's excellent information.
A Brad's
we-
thoughts agenda item. I'd like
directors
to.
just want to know.
Yeah.
You know, be able to talk with.
And speaking of CPUD, yeah, I would expect that to be on the agenda at the next board meeting.
Nice.
The updated agreement with CPUD.
Thanks, Brad.
Brad, could you do something for me? Drop that.
Oh, yeah, is
shade
it open?
back there.
Yeah, both of them, actually, both doors, if you could.
Sure.
That'll put sunglasses on.
So much for transparency.
Actually, go down a little bit just past the handle if you could.
Sure.
Thank
I
you,
can't
Brad.
put on.
That's all I had,
Awesome.
unless
thank
there's
you.
questions for
Thank
me.
That's an excellent way to influence the board, Brad.
you. All right, board reports. Let's go to Scott.
Where's Bertha to go first? She usually goes first.
All right, let's move on to Jeff first. We'll come back to you. Jeff, you have anything?
I have nothing to report.
I knew that. That's why I went to you. How about Russ? Do you have anything to report?
I have a lot to report.
You do.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Here we go. You have plenty of time, Scott.
Okay, so he's looking up. You know, this isn't my opportunity to, you know, my 15 minutes of fame or anything, but I missed the last
You don't
meeting.
have 15 minutes. We only give you 3.
I missed the last meeting because I was down at the Mayo Clinic, and Director Ratterman called and said, "What the hell are you doing in the Mayo Clinic?" And I just wanted, in the interest of full disclosure here, I have a medical condition that I'm attacking aggressively by going down and taking 6 weeks of proton radiation therapy.
Only told me none of your damn business.
It was not intended to be a secret. And so I'm going to be in excellent hands down there. The treatment regimen is virtually, I don't know, painless. The getting prepared for it was not painless, but anyway, I'll have like a 10-minute treatment at 7 o'clock each day for 5 days a week for 6 weeks. And I'll go out and run, or, well, I won't run in 110 degree.
114.
Treadmill.
But this prostate cancer thing is, all of these men in the room will deal with this, when you approach your 80th birthday, for sure. But it's nothing to really be fearful of. You just attack it and take care of it. So I will be missing the next 3 meetings. I won't be sitting here, but I'll be calling in remotely and participating as aggressively as I normally do, as snarkily as I sometimes do.
Good.
So keep a close eye on your typos.
Yeah.
Will do.
I don't know, how much is it going to cost to send an agenda packet down? But I expect to be around for a long, long time. I will be declaring my candidacy to run for another term. And
You got to do that this year.
yeah, I do.
I got to do that too.
So there's no reason to say, oh, poor Russ. I'm going to be around for a long time. So I want to make sure of it.
Well, I think I can safely speak for staff on this one, that we wish you all the best and hopefully it all goes very well and you're back here as soon as possible.
And include them, the board in those same wishes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, that's, this guy needles me way too much, but I enjoy everybody else.
Stop to that.
Have the doctors identified a link between you? Suggested.
Between Jeff and your prostate.
That's much.
We'll stop there. Anyway, I enjoy everybody here very much.
Well, we're glad you're here. Is that it?
Mhm.
All right, Scott, back to you.
Okay, Dad, I had a meeting this week with the Aqua Local Government Committee. I'm on a study group on that fixed cost, putting them on the I think it's something we're going to be looking at and coming up on one of our, on the property tax roll. And looking at fixed charges on a water bill as well as potential sewer. Also, and I'm going to be talking to you, Damon. I'm also on that same group, local government is looking at a paving and a process that districts, cities, counties go through for paving. There's a lot of problems across the state. So it's something, and it's something that we've talked about here. We had a issue with the way the county was charging us and their new protocols and procedures. And I think we did a little bit of work on that to resolve that problem. But that's a meeting that'll be coming up. Oh, I'm also on the Aqua JPIA Property Committee. We have a meeting coming up in a couple weeks in Roseville. I'll be attending that. And then the Mountain Counties tour takes place on June 23rd with a reception on the evening of June 22nd. And then we have our regular Mountain Counties meeting on the morning of the 23rd. All that will take place in El Dorado Hills. That's all I got right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott.
I've got a question about putting the operating portion of the bills on the tax roll. Do you have an anticipated timeline for getting that implemented, or is it going to be years away, or?
Right now, there's a lot of, it's already in the water health and safety code. And there's a lot of cities and counties and special districts that do their sewer. That's the only, they don't send out bills, never have. Their sewer bill goes directly to the county, becomes part of the property tax. And to me, it just cuts cost, cuts activities and customer service. And that's something that it can be done right now. There's a question on the fixed portion of the water bills, not the consumption part of it. There's two parts of a water bill. And we're looking at proposing potential legislation, which will be sent to the Aqua State Ledge Committee, which Michael chairs, to look at, but we're looking at, we just had our first meeting towards the legislation Monday. And looking at what it's going to look like and what that, how to do it. But there's a lot of, in that conversation and on Monday, there's a lot of districts and cities and counties that are doing that already as well.
Of this size?
We don't have an agenda, as you guys, we should.
Yeah, we'll bring it back. It was a topic of discussion for the last Aqua Board meeting as well. And just to clarify, I'm not the chair of the State Ledge Committee. I'm a member of the State Ledge Committee, but I do not chair it.
Okay, not yet. Huh?
Well, you should.
Yeah, agendize that.
I don't wish that.
Yeah, agendize that at some point.
Sure.
That'll be interesting to talk about.
Yeah, we have already requested that.
All right, for me, for the TSAN IRWM, we have met in person, and we're planning on meeting in person next week as well. And then as far as any future agenda items, will you make sure that we get information on Mr. Brock with that leak adjustment? I think that might come to us for approval maybe. So make sure you follow up with that gentleman. And then the employee appreciation party at some point, I'd like to see that. Anything else, folks? All right. Next board meetings are Wednesday, June 22nd and Wednesday, July 13th. And we will be going into closed session. Want to do a quick little recess? All right, so we're going to do a little recess and go into closed session at, was it 3:30 something? 3:38. Okay, so we're
Is
back
there
from
somebody
closed
waiting in the
session,
lobby?
and it's 5:18. No more going from closed session. Now we'll move on to item 12, new business. 12A, discussion action on amendment to general manager's employment contract.
I'll make a motion to approve the amendment to the general manager and employment contract. Second.
All in favor?
But yeah, is any public?
All public comment?
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Me?
I'll have to vote in favor.
Okay. So, okay, I think that's it. No other comments about that adjournment at 5:19. That work? 7:57.
It's all right.